He was hardly, I think he was the greatest air commander in the history of aviation. He was focused, he was aggressive, he knew the aircraft, he invented the tactics, he was brilliant out in the Pacific. He was a great man, but as a social person, he was a dud. It got so that the commanders of the various groups said, let's invite him to dinner, let's get him to know us and we'll get to know him and things might be easier. So one of them called and said, General, we'd like to have you come to dinner. And there was a long pause and he said, no. He says, I won't go. And the colonel said, well, why, sir? He said, because I may have to fire one of you the next morning. That's Curtis LeMay. Jim Doodle was entirely, parenthetically, Jim Doodle was an entirely different person. He was charismatic, genial. He was a brilliant, I guess the best pilot we had. And, well, he sort of invented the instrument system. Did a lot of work on that. And the only time I ever saw him angry, he was at our officers' club one night, and a second lieutenant, newly arrived, came up to him and said, General, who flew your plane on the mission to Tokyo? And with that, he exploded. And I think the second lieutenant exploded too, because we never saw him again. But we returned to our base, and we were told we were going to a flak house. Now, the missions were very tough at that time. And after, the tour was 25 missions, after 15 missions, if you survived, you were entitled to go to a flak house, which was an estate in southern England, where you could have rest and recreation and Red Cross girls. And they delegated us to go to the flak house after 3 missions. I said, I really don't want to go. I think it's more important that we continue to fly instead of sitting and thinking about going back to missions after what we had been through. But of course, we went to the flak house. And they had a golf course there. My navigator, I had never played golf. My navigator said to me, we had nothing else to do. He said, let's play golf. I said, okay. So we looked around and found some old golf clubs and some very dirty old golf balls. Went out on the golf course, and there they had sheep ranging over and grazing on the golf course. They needed the food. And we found out that the sheep turds looked identically like the dirty old golf balls. And we had difficulty discerning when we hit the ball or what, which was which, and we were splattered, and I never played golf after that. We came back and we continued to fly our missions, and finally the crew, we flew the first missions over Berlin in March, and our last mission as a crew was on March 8th, 1944, and before the mission, crew came to me and said, Rosie, we've had a tough time. Would you buzz the field if we get back? And I was always very conservative, and I said, probably not. I don't think it's a good idea. I'll think about it. Well, nobody was damaged on that mission. It was a perfect mission. We all came back, and I thought, well, what the hell? These guys have been through all sorts of things. I let everybody else land, and then I came in with my wheels down, and before I came to the runway, I put full throttle on, headed for the tower, and I could see the men in the tower hitting the deck, and I rose up, and I swooped down, had 3 buzz jobs, came in, and went to the debriefing room, and there somebody approached me and said, Rosie, did you know that General Hughlin, the head of the 13th Wing, was on the tower, and he hit the deck, and he mussed up his clothes. I said, Rosenthal, you've done it again. And as I looked up, I saw General Hughlin coming toward me, And my heart sank, and he came to me, had a big grin on his face, shook my hand, and said, "One hell of a buzz job, Rosie." So I was relieved. My crew went on, left the group, their tour was finished. I decided to stay on. I had seen Coventry, the destruction at Coventry, the destruction at the East End of London. I saw families living in the underground at night, women nursing their children, families huddled together for warmth and comfort, and I was touched. And I felt there were so many people who were enslaved, who couldn't resist, and I had the ability to continue to fight, and I stayed on. And I was put into operations, put in charge of lead crew training, and became squadron commander of the 350th. I'll give you an example of a milk run. I led the group to Berlin with a crew. Pilot was named Kincannon. And over the target, our number 4 engine was hit badly, and all the oil drained out, and the engine froze. And as it turned, the whole engine turned, not the propeller. And I thought the wing was going to come off. I thought the plane was going to shatter. Well, I dove the plane down, full throttle, pulled it up sharply, pulled back on the throttle, and I snapped the shaft, and the propeller was spinning wildly, and I knew we couldn't continue that way. I repeated the maneuver, and this time the shaft and the propeller came out, and it clipped the propeller on the number 3 engine, and we feathered that. And we started back. We picked up a P-47 as an escort, and over the channel, the number 3 engine started to sputter, and I told the navigator to pick out the nearest airfield. The number 3 conked out. We're approaching the landing at the airfield. Number 4 conked out, made a perfect landing, and that was it. That's what I call a milk run. Nobody was hurt.